Trump's sentencing in hush money case is postponed until September after Supreme Court immunity ruling. Donald Trump will not be sentenced on his business fraud conviction until September. A New York judge ruled Tuesday in the wake of Monday's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity. The delay in sentencing means the former president is likely to escape any concrete punishment for his felony conviction during the summer. At the same time, Trump's election bid has been boosted by President Joe Biden's debate flop that has Democrats wondering whether to replace their nominee. Talk about since Thursday, like the dam broke, everything's coming up Trump. He is just winning. This Supreme Court ruling, when did this come down? Did this come down on, it was Thursday, right? What day?
The immunity win was yesterday.
Yesterday.
It's been a long 24 hours.
Seriously.
Can you believe that was one day ago?
Right. I was like, that had to have been last week. No,
I mean, you were expecting it to be last week because they don't typically go, like
on
they had
Mondays,
to extend their
I was
term.
like, wasn't Friday the last day? No, they did extend it. Trump is just winning across the board. This is nuts. And I actually expect, I don't know that Judge Merchan will accept. I don't know if it's going to go to Judge Merchan. Is Judge Merchan the first line in determining whether or not to overturn this conviction?
Yeah.
Yes.
He's going to say, screw off. You're convicted.
I'm actually surprised they even let them delay the sentencing hearing at this point. I'm shocked by that.
Well, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, Alvin Bragg, sent this letter saying, well, we think that their claims are meritless, but we would be okay with you delaying it by 2 weeks, right? So he was saying, it could go to late July, basically. Right. And it is interesting. I don't think Merchan likes Trump. I think he'd be happy to see him locked up. But it is interesting that he was like, it's going to be a lot more than 2 weeks. We really got to review this thing.
Yeah, well, because this throws in a monkey wrench in the entire case at this point, because they were actually they were relying on evidence that was,
the case is literally when Trump was president, he signed a check for his lawyer, and that's evidence out.
So it's done. Absolutely. And so when that is your key point of evidence that you're relying on in order to try to get this conviction, and it comes out and the Supreme Court is saying, they haven't said this directly about this case yet, but, from every point of view that I've heard at this point, it seems like that's going to be the argument.
I think Merchan's going to do everything he can not to have it thrown out entirely, but to have a new trial again. But obviously a new trial would probably not occur before the election. So all of this ran out. The other thing that happens
is they're not worth anything.
Right. So this is September 18th. It's sort of mid to late September. Hunter Biden goes to trial on his tax stuff on September 5th. So we're going to have these dueling trials on opposite coasts as everyone sort of looks at these two political families and say, like, what's going on with you guys?
Yeah.
Well, because taxation is theft, free Hunter Biden. Free Hunter Biden. I'm kidding on that front. I'm not a staunch
Turns out we're hugely supportive of Hunter Biden.
But the gun charge thing, I am all about free Hunter Biden. He should be pardoned. And I hope that the conviction gets challenged to the Supreme Court and they overturn that.
Did they release the sentencing date for that?
I don't know. What I can say, though, is it's not just this one case. Trump's going to win all of them now. Like, there's no way any of these other cases can stand. All of them required evidence that were official duties. They are using Trump's... And the Supreme Court makes an important point. Using the president's official duties as evidence of wrongdoing is to indicate that his official duties are components of wrongdoing. I agree. I mean, they're all out. So he's talking to Mike Pence on January 6th. Official duties gone. He's talking to politicians, states about election results, contesting the results. That's his out. He's the chief law enforcement officer of this country.
I mean, how many lines did we see as the president? He needed to step in and do whatever, which we know he did, of course, send messages saying go home, whatever else. But everyone invoked this as his official responsibility to intercede on January 6th. So I don't really understand how that case could go forward. I mean, it is amazing to me that the panic and hysteria has become, well, now we have a king, when actually this is something that the Biden administration themselves are probably going to rely on so that no one goes after them in the future.
Well, so the reason that this case in D.C. for the J6 situation is going to move forward is because the judge is Judge Chutkan. And I don't know if you know anything about Judge Chutkan, but she is a zealot. Okay, she is a left-wing zealot that has, imprisoned these J6ers for years and years and years. Probably that wasn't a randomly selected judge. I know that's what they're trying to say, but she has to be the one at this point to, throw the case out. She's not going to do that. So they're going to try to push forward with this case. And if anything, the J6 one is the one that would have the least merit at this point, given the Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah. So do you think that this is going to make Never Trumpers more hysterical, or what's the effect going to be? Does anyone look at the Supreme Court Supreme Court's ruling and think, oh, maybe we've gotten this wrong.
Are they not already hysterical enough?
There's a hysteria.
Is there a ceiling is what I mean.
I don't think so. I mean, at this point, you're looking at, I'm sure you guys heard all, yesterday, the panic from the left. These Congress people that you'd never heard of in your life that came out of the woodwork and say, well, Joe Biden can just, at this point, he can just use SEAL Team 6 to take out President Trump or whatever at this point. I mean, just bonkers stuff. Or I can't even believe that it's almost like, are these people this stupid or are they...
They literally live in a world where they think being a rogue actor president killing your rivals is official duties. But hold on, think about this. Let me just point this out for a second. The reason why they're upset about this is because Barack Obama murdered 16-year-old Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki, an American citizen. He was born, I believe he was born in Colorado, and he grew up in San Diego, and he was visiting family that he had in Yemen, and Barack Obama ordered his death. And that's why they're scared, because to them, they have long known the president has the authority to execute Americans without charge or trial. And now they're scared that they can't do anything if that power is used against their interests. Now, I'm not going to say the average Democrat understands any of that. I'm saying at the highest levels, they're like, I don't believe there's a scenario where Democrats or Republicans are really worried that the Democrats are going to drone strike Trump or send SEAL Team 6 in. What this really means is Democrats know Donald Trump can order SEAL Team 6 to go after Democrat assets in foreign countries, and ain't nothing's ever going to be done about it. They've got assets in Ukraine that are probably operating illegally. You've got people like Hunter Biden, obviously, who operated illegally in Burisma. I don't think he's at risk of anything like that. But imagine if Barack Obama's killed, and I believe he killed, there's two I can name off the top of my head, Anwar al-Awlaki and Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki. Anwar was accused of being a jihadi, so Obama assassinated him. And then his son, who was not accused of anything, was killed in a whoopsie-daisy by Obama's administration claimed. Think about what happens when Obama murders Americans and they don't do anything about it. Because Republicans didn't care either. Now, if Donald Trump knows that there's some asset on par with the likes of Anwar al-Awlaki that is assisting Democrats in some way, and he targets them, Democrats have nothing. They can't do anything about it.
Is this because of the NDAA? Ever since they signed that thing, National Defense Authorization Act, that gave the president the authority to drone bomb a citizen because of their assumed that they're a terrorist?
Well, the NDAA didn't do that. The National Defense Authorization Act is re-upped every year, but in 2012, it was the indefinite detention provision. It included a provision that would allow the president to basically rendition anyone at any time for any reason. They could grab you, put a black bag over your head, bring you out to the middle of the ocean and put you on a boat and torture you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's when I started speaking up about this craziness. And I think the Supreme Court's just solidifying that is the law right now. That's how the law reads. If you want to change the law, get rid of that provision.
I'm fine with it. It just means impeach Obama. You have to impeach him retroactively for his actions that he took. And that's never going to happen because the Republican Party, for the most part, is totally down with it. But you got to impeach him and say that is a high crime. We hereby assert that action is a high crime and a misdemeanor, or a misdemeanor is not an official act. Then after you impeach and convict, then you can bring in criminal prosecution.
But I find it really interesting that no former president has said anything about this at all. Nothing about the Supreme Court ruling. They're radio silent on it. And you're like, I wonder why. This is, of course they support this. Yeah, they actually do. Joe Biden supports this ruling. He's just not going to say that's not politically expedient.
Well, it's not on teleprompter, so he doesn't.
That's right.
He doesn't know that he supports it or doesn't support it. I mean, that's the whole thing about all of this, really, which is like, and I said this last night, so I don't mean to be a broken record, but there wasn't a way that the Supreme Court could rule on this issue that would make especially progressives, but just even average Democrats happy, right? Because all of this is about fear mongering. It's about saying, well, now Trump's going to be out of control and you have to go to the polls because otherwise, everything we know falls apart. When actually, I was referencing this before the show. If you watch the way Australian media and British media are covering this issue, they're reporting that it's a new law. It's a new law that is allowing to happen when actually, no, it's the Supreme Court's interpretation of existing law, and that's why the Supreme Court is there to settle these matters. There is a fundamental belief that somehow this is going to change everything, when actually it's clarification of how we already operate as a country. And again, the hysteria is what they think will drive voters to the polls. So they need to be mad at the Supreme Court. They need to be fearful of Trump to have any action with their party.
So in reality, nothing has really changed with this ruling at all, because this wasn't even necessary. It was always understood that presidents had a level of immunity, right? But this wasn't a problem until Joe Biden decided to weaponize the DOJ to go after his political opponent. That's it. That's the only reason we're even talking about this right now.
It's a little bit of a tangent here, but I've long thought the Supreme Court needs some sort of term limit, because I think with life extension coming up, you're going to see 150-year-olds, 130-year-olds. Ketanji Brown Jackson, 80 years from now, could still be on the court.
I agree with that. I wouldn't agree with the idea of like term limits, but I do agree with the argument of life extension, because we are going to get to the point where you're right. Ketanji Brown Jackson will be hooked up like Mr. House in New Vegas to a gurney with tubes coming out of her, and she's gonna be like,
well, I mean,
that was the whole rumor about
sort of like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, though.
right.
And like when the mind goes at the old age. So I put it on Twitter. I'm like, Supreme Court needs term limits. And I think people assumed that I'm only saying that because I disagreed with this verdict, which I don't, by the way. But I think now's a good time. The ball's in your court. If you believe that they did the right thing, the ball's now in your court. You have the power to suggest, even though I believe they do the right thing, I still want to see term limits for these people.
See, I think it speaks more to culture. I think we should have a culture that believes that we have a generation that can take over power. Everyone is so power hungry that really, like with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I mean, the rumor was that she was not alive and her staff was just pretending she was so they could continue to issue rulings, right? Sure. Because they need her as the figurehead. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that was the rumor. But Sandra Day O'Connor stepped down really early, fairly young, and she continued to have a life of advocacy and talking about, starting educational programs for children. It's the person's decision to stay or leave. And in a lot of these cases, perhaps the justices themselves are power hungry, but also there's a lot of pressure to stay in until it's optimal for the party that they think you align with to replace you. So that was one of the things that happened with Ginsburg.
And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she thought for sure that Hillary Clinton was going to win that election. She would be able to, because she couldn't really step down before that. They were having such a hard time even getting Merrick Garland through.
Later, they were like, you should have stepped down earlier so Obama could have appointed
exactly.
someone. I mean, this is the thing about the Supreme Court is like, I agree with you. Maybe there's a question of like, as we live longer and longer, how long do they want to stay in court? On the other hand, if we had a culture that allowed people to retire and transition power, it would work better. I mean, really, what we're doing to our geriatric leaders right now is kind of crazy. Either they're so power hungry they want to stay in power, Joe Biden, or they are being propped up so that the people under them who can't gain that position rightfully on their own can use it to get their will through. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe and we'll see you all there.